There are huge needs in the world.
There's issues all around the world.
Vast numbers of those who are without Christ.
There's the unreached, the least reached, the most gospel resistant.
And then huge physical needs represented around the world.
I know that Latin America has a lot of necessity, especially with our economies. I think it's the poverty.
Most people in Africa do not know where the next meal will come from.
Many children, they live in the street.
So when you talk about people living on less than $1 a day, it means that every meal is a prayer.
There's an acronym, it's THUMB. There's the tribal groups, the Hindus, the unreligious peoples, the Muslims, and the Buddhists.
You have people who believe in witchcraft, for example. People dedicating their children to spirits of the dead.
These are people that are desperately trying to find God.
I think it's easy to watch the news and look at the people over there.
I think we've come to believe the lie, and that is that people are the enemy.
Especially the ones that are walking in Islam. They're totally deceived.
We see communism, we think the communists are the enemy, are Nazis back in the World War.
The word says we don't battle against flesh and blood, but it's principalities, it's powers of darkness, it's demonic forces.
The people are not the enemy, Satan is the enemy. The people are the ones who are lost and caught in those strongholds.
Most of them are not jihadists. They're not trying to kill anyone. They're just trying to raise their families and feed them, put food on the table.
When we realized that, we could see them through Jesus' eyes.
They too are created in the image of God.
But the fact of the matter is that the people will start making war against us in the natural, I really believe, if we don't feed them in the supernatural. Why do I pray for Al-Qaeda leaders? Why do I pray for the Taliban? Why do I pray for wicked people? Because they don't even know they're puppets for demonic forces.
A friend of mine from Nigeria told me, he said, Mike, the work of missions is prayer.
Prayer, it can be a common factor for all the countries.
That's why I like Operation World.
If I need to explain simply what is Operation World, is a book that refers to me the reality of every country.
Every country, every province, from countries like China, India, it's all in here.
When you talk about different countries, the people groups. Talk about Kenya, over 40 different tribes. Talk about Nigeria, over 150 different dialects.
How they live, how many they are, what are the culture, the customs, their economic condition, their social condition.
Operation World takes all of the different needs, countries in the world, and God's desire for His glory in the world, and puts practical helps in the hands of believers to know how best to pray.
God bless you, sir.
As a pastor, I wanted to put in the hands of the people that I lead a resource that can expose them to God's heart for the nations.
Back when I was a pastor, we had a missions conference at our church, and we had a book table and offered Operation World.
Tom brought that book home, and I thought, well, this is really exciting. And I have to tell you, I'm kind of geographically challenged, so honestly, that was the first thing that drew me in, was being able to see, you know, the worldview of really where each country is, what the people group is, you know, the basic statistics on them, and then to be able to pray for them.
When I started praying for these people in this area of the world called the 1040 window, God started doing something in my heart.
God has used that to prick their hearts and stir their hearts with a desire to go.
The more we prayed globally, the more God opened our eyes to see really how small the world is and how short our time is.
And I can tell you that to this day, it's been going on 19 years.
And eventually, he used that to call us to leave pastoring the church.
And we want to do what God has called us to do, and that is to share Christ to the nations.
How did it happen? It was all birthed in the place of prayer.
It started with prayer.
And God has called me to pray for the billions of people in the 1040 window.
Well, I do know God has called us to go, but He doesn't call every single person to go. But just because He hasn't called you to go doesn't mean that you can't be on your face before God and your prayers are the things that are going.
And I know that God responds to prayer. And I know that I'm praying the will of God when I'm praying for the salvation of other people. Hello, of course. Why should a church pray?
I do think that we, as Christians, many times lose our vision.
We've got to understand that God loves each and every one of these people.
And if we do not pray for these unreached people, they will go into a Christless eternity.
Jesus said, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. So ask the Lord of the harvest to send out workers. When he saw the need in the harvest, the first thing he told his disciples to do was to pray.
It's part of our job description.
Globally, the global church, there's 1% that are involved in any kind of global outreach or prayer. Imagine if we could move that needle from 1% to 2%. Double that. Just imagine what God would do.
One of the leaders in the Middle East was asked this question: why do you feel like there's so much response to the gospel? He says they've done everything the same way as far as evangelism and that type of thing, but the only new component is the prayer component. And they really believe they start seeing a big change in people's receptivity to the gospel when the whole praying through the window effort started.
As we go into the Middle East, we were shocked to see the strength of the church, the vibrancy, the boldness that they had to share the gospel. But as we saw that, we realized that there was a team that had been there before any of the missionaries were there, any of the nationals were in place, and it was the prayer team that God had assembled. And amazingly, we scratched our heads and went, we were a part of that. I think believers are looking for informed prayer that you get in Operation World, not just bless the world, bring peace to the Middle East. Would we even know how to measure that? We found that Operation World gives us the ability to give believers some informed prayer requests.
What we see that is happening in the Middle East right now, what's happening in some of these 1040 window nations, we didn't know how God was going to answer our prayers, but we kept hitting that mountain and hitting that mountain and hitting that mountain in prayer because we want to see God's people set free. That's why we continue to pray.
And so prayer is something that changes things, brings hope.
So it's happening even in the most difficult places in the world. Believers are praying and God's answering.